appreciate it. Hey guys, happy Thursday. Today's Thursday, December 13th. Lucky 13, 2018, of course. I'm with my old friend. I said old. I didn't want to say old in there. I said long-time friend.
It is old.
From UCF, from Jimmy and Pete, which we'll talk about in a minute, Roy Reid. So let us know you can hear us and see us. Pop on. I don't know if you know the story, but of course I had Justin Clark, who's a friend of mine, my attorney. He did an entire show once, and everybody made comments, and then later on there was no audio at all. So you couldn't download it, you couldn't see it. Boomer Pal's on. Boomer, let us know you can hear us or see us. And did you know that you can't, hey Steve Bell, you can't tell by that number up here, people can actually block themselves from being seen live.
Okay.
And so when the numbers hit at the end of the show, you're like, where did all those people come from? Or I have people who say, I only had 2 viewers, Ted. I'm like, just wait. Thank you, Luke. I'm sure you look amazing, too. Thank you, Steve Bell. All right, so welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
I'm so happy, finally, after all this time.
I know.
We've got Melanie over here. You can't see her, but we've got to give her a shout out. Oh, look who's on. We were just talking about you, Mark Hayes.
Mark,
what's up, buddy? It was all good, I promise. This is a family show. So Roy, you and I go back UCF many moons ago. O-Team, Pete Fisher, Greek system, student government. I mean, we have a history that's insane. Don't worry, we're not going to share all that history, I promise you. Bob Moylan, what's up? So give us a little background on you. Everybody likes to know the origin story.
Well, as you said, I graduated from UCF. I grew up here. My family moved to Orlando in the late 60s. So we predated the arrival of Disney and have been able to watch this community grow and be a part of it for so many years. And it's so exciting now to be in this community today when you see things like the university grow into the prominence that it. Oh, they're 25-0. Did you hear that? And
I think everybody has heard that.
Not enough people.
Not enough.
But, and to see friends doing the things that we're doing, being a part of the fabric of the growth and the planning and what this community's growing into. And, I hope that we get to see it continue to do that.
So how did you, so I know enough, but they don't. So you came to UCF, but you obviously didn't go there and go, hey, I'm going to eventually work with a project called the Trust Transformation.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about your background. What did you want to do? What did you come here to do? Give them a little bit of information.
So I tell people when I talk about my time at UCF that it's defined by 3 or 4 things. And probably the most influential of those was being selected on the orientation team, the O-Team, and working with Jimmy Farrell. And then being a part of that process where a lot of my friends were part of that team, and then the peer advisory team, which you were a part of, led by Pete Fisher. And being part of UCF back in the early 80s when there were 18,000 students and maybe a dozen buildings on campus as opposed to today's 68,000, I think.
Insane.
And just everything imaginable on campus. Those days created a tight-knit group of people, and you had folks like Jimmy and Pete who always really focused us on the relationships. So when I look around the community and see people I've known since those days, it's like we were there yesterday.
It's crazy.
And
right?
You and I can go years and years. Sharon,
and hey, Precious.
And so it's like we were just together yesterday out there working on projects that were never going to be used by us, but years later, a legacy of students benefit from a lot of that work, whether it's the student union or the programs that we were part of in the early days. Just amazing.
I think back to that time, and I think, oh my God, I knew something special was going on, but I didn't realize that it would eventually stop. I didn't realize the university would get as big as it did. No. And then, of course, Pete left. Jimmy, they both passed. And so that particular era was so unique and so amazing, but it's created these leaders and these people in the community who have impacted other people.
Right. And you ask about the trust transformation. The thing that stayed with me more than anything else was the emphasis that Jimmy and Pete and some of the others out there really put on us to make relationships the most important thing, to focus on getting people in your life that both inspired you and kept you accountable to, and building that network of relationships and friends. And at the core of any productive, fulfilling, rewarding relationship is trust. And I've had the benefit of almost a 30-year career in communications, working with some amazing people over that time. I mean, I have the greatest job in the world right now, working with Adventist Health System, soon to be Advent Health, with a team of wonderful communicators. And every day, people there show up with that same idea in mind, that I'm going to be intentional and mindful about building trust with the people I work with and work for and serve, because that's where the relationships really take hold, and that's how you make a difference.
So let's jump into trust, because I think it's so important. I had a whole bunch of private messages, text messages going. I'm so excited to talk about this topic.
Cool.
But I think we have to start with defining what trust is.
Sure. So, there's the textbook definition. It's the belief or the adherence in something to be true, or reliable. Those are all very good words. In the end, though, I think a lot of people miss out on the fact that trust isn't one simple idea. It's really comprised of a lot of different ideas. And by that, right out of the gates, when I ask people why they trust somebody, and they give me a lot of words to answer that, those words usually fall into one of two categories: emotion or experience. So when you think about that first impression you make with somebody that comes off, it's usually really based on a reaction you have emotionally, but over time, that experience that you have informs how much you're going to trust that person. And so in the program, Ted, we really try to break it down into small parts, understanding that even in those two buckets, there's ideas like being trustworthy, which is different than being trusted. That's sort of the congratulations.
How is that different? I'm fascinated.
So trustworthy is the idea that you believe in trusting yourself. And it's the congratulations, you've earned the right to be trusted. So it's those ideas that make that up: the integrity you live by, the focus you have on things, the priorities that you place, the initiative you take, the attitude that you have. It's those very personal ideas that you adhere to. Authenticity is a part of it on the emotional side that says, I'm committed to make my individual relationships as rich, meaningful, and real as I possibly can. And then along the experiential side is this concept of dependability. I keep my promises and I communicate consistently. And when those are in place and we earn the trust, and it's earned, and it has to be cultivated, then we can do things with it. We can be influential and help make a difference in people's lives, and in the lives of the community and other places.
Why do you think, so obviously this, in the old days, like people talk about the old days, right? This is before Roy and I, the old days. People would do a deal on a handshake.
Sure.
Your word meant everything. It was your bill of sale. It was your agreement. And then we shifted and have continued to shift. So do you feel like it's harder to get that point across to people? Because in the description that I copied from your site, there were so many things. It had so many different levels to it.
Right.
But I think the bottom line is that people are afraid to trust other people. So how do we get to that? And is it more challenging in this day and age?
So I think people are people, and they always have been. And so there's a consistency in this that is going to be the same as it was any other time. I would tell you that maybe we're more distracted these days, that oftentimes we don't put as much priority on the presence of a relationship, on being in people's lives at a very personal and present area. And so it's easy to discount it. And I think people also assume it. They'll assume, hey, you should trust me. I'm a good person. And it's not always in our hands. And so one of the things that we also teach people is that in addition to building trust from the inside out, which is that idea of trustworthiness and then authenticity and dependability, is the idea that we want to take responsibility for the relationship. We want to, and every relationship's not going to work out, and quite frankly, some are worth getting out of. They can be toxic. And so you want to hold people accountable to these same ideas that we teach you to be accountable to. But to your question, it's when you take responsibility for it, when you're intentional about these things, you're mindful about these things, it creates an environment around you And that environment is a culture that begins to grow from that. And so the collateral benefit of intentionality and taking responsibility is that not only will the relationship you're focused on hopefully improve, or you're able to see clearly that you should walk away, but it's the relationships around you that are also affected by that. People see your behavior. People want to model that behavior. People want to be a part of that. And that creates even a bigger picture and opportunity for people to build the kind of relationships that matter.
I love the intentionality part too, because I think people, because of whatever their own background
there's
is.
a guy that's intentional.
Vic Colazzo, I love you. You
Always
came on.
intentional.
Always love Vic Colazzo. We were just talking about Pete and Jimmy, Vic. And I saw Jill Gentry popped on too.
Yeah,
Hey, Jill.
absolutely.
The intentionality. So I go into, I don't know what you'll have to, you can analyze me. I go into a relationship.
You sure?
Oh God, you probably charge $300 an hour to analyze me. I go into a relationship, whether it be personal or professional, and I have an immediate trust until you prove me otherwise.
Sure.
What is that on the spectrum? I mean, is that the stupidest thing I could possibly do? I have a hard time being distrusting immediately because
Right.
I don't want to think like that.
Sure. And I would tell you that I may start out on the other side of that. I may be a little more skeptical on that. And I don't think where you start is the wrong answer. I think it's what you do to really, again, be intentional about engaging the relationship. So if we go to that relationship and we're asking the question in terms of what's the integrity, is there a consistency in this behavior? Am I committed to a certain ethic or set of ideas that define those behaviors? Is this other person also doing the same thing, right? So it's both a mirror for ourselves to hold up and hold ourselves accountable, as well as a set of ideas that say, I am going to be judged oftentimes by the people I surround myself with or bring into my life. Yeah. And so I want to use it as a measure for those things as well. And we need to be thoughtful of that. So again, I don't think that it's wrong to start out either skeptical or fully embracing to it, but having the right attitude when you engage people for the first time, making them feel valued and important in what you do, and then being again intentional about how am I serving the relationship. So I had somebody ask me over the holidays, I'm going to get around the table at Thanksgiving and so-and-so is going to start a conversation that's just going to go the wrong direction. What do I do? And I said, if you're taking responsibility for the relationship, then just don't react. Let it go. Save it for a different day.
So hard for people to do, though. I'm the same way. Like, I would tell people, don't react. It's not the right place or time.
Right.
Because what is that going to do? It's just it snowballs at that point, and it becomes more problematic. But a lot of people think, say, it's my opinion, it's my feeling, so I have to get it out right now. Right. I can't tell you how many people I counsel on that.
So one of the very first things that we talk about in the program is the idea of being humble. And humble is not weak. Humble is strong. Humble is an idea that says, I don't need to necessarily put my words out there right away. I don't need to win the argument today. It's okay to walk away when you know that the bigger idea that you're trying to achieve is more important than that. And I tell a story as part of the program, and that story goes back to almost 10 years ago when I first started talking about this. I'd had the opportunity to get a large group out west to bring me in as a keynote speaker with this content, and probably a month out from it, I came home one evening, and my daughter, who's the youngest of four and the only girl.
God bless her.
Right.
The only girl in the Reid family.
That's right.
Other than your beautiful wife, Kim.
Absolutely. So Faith had converted our dining room into a bracelet factory. And if you have daughters, this is not an uncommon thing. And the thing to understand is it's a safety violation with all these little beads going everywhere. Well, she breathlessly runs up and asked me if I'd wear this bracelet she made for me. And I said, absolutely, I'd wear it. And it was Memorial Day weekend, so we were at all of the different events that weekend. And she's taking me around to show and tell with this bracelet. So proud. So Tuesday morning rolls around. I have to get ready for work. I had a meeting that day with a client that required a suit and tie and everything else. So I just leave the bracelet on the dresser and head off. And I come home that night, and she is still completely enamored with this bracelet factory. Comes up to me in the kitchen brings a different bracelet up to me, different beads, the whole 9 yards. And all I can think of is I've only got so much arm to give to the cause.
Right.
And she says to me, Daddy, if you didn't like the other bracelet, will you wear this one?
Wow.
And it shattered me right
Sure,
there on the
sure.
kitchen floor.
Yeah.
And what it said to me was that I did not account for what she heard me say.
Yeah.
The little thing, right? She heard me say, yes, I'd wear the bracelet. Not that I'd wear it with the shorts and t-shirt, not that I'd wear it just this weekend, not that I would wear the bracelet. So when she saw it on the dresser, in her 7-year-old mind, the only thing she could conclude was I didn't like it.
Right.
So I went back into the bedroom and I got the bracelet off of the thing and I wear it every day. This is it right here.
Faith,
So-
look at what you did.
I know, right?
It's even our kids can change us so much and make such an impact.
And it really targeted into the concept that every little thing I say or do is either contributing to or taking away from the trust that people have in me. So if I'm not
That's so
intentional
powerful.
and I'm not mindful, I am going to mess up. I mess up every day. I wrote the book. I mess up every day. I forget things. I say insensitive things. I miss a deadline. I do things that will take away from the trust if I'm not intentional about fixing it, going back and doing something about it. And if I know the smaller parts of it, it's easier to go in and do something about it.
That's true. Talk a little bit about that. So knowing the smaller parts, that means you really have invested in getting to know that person or that relationship, and you've delved in enough where you can identify the smaller parts.
So again, if you think about the idea of trustworthiness, they're all markers in their attributes, if you will, of trustworthy people. They have integrity. They have the right attitude. They're focused on what's important. They take initiative. They seek insight from others. They persevere through difficulties. They do excellent work, and they have a vision for something bigger than themselves. So if you take those 8 ideas and you stack them up and you think to yourself, hey, I missed something with Ted. I didn't do something with Ted, so I didn't keep my word. That's an integrity question. So I know I can go back and fix it, and I understand how that is. Or if I show up and I'm all attitude in the wrong kind of way, and I push people away with that, I know that that's the problem. I can go back and fix that. If I try to take it on at too big a deal, then it's more difficult. It's like, again, it's the old adage, you have to eat the elephant one bite at a time. You can't take the whole thing on. So if I know all of the smaller parts of how people are going to trust me, it's easier to deal with. When we talk about authenticity, we're talking about the consistency that you have with others. We talk about the idea of respect, right? You can argue with people, you can fight with people about things. What you can't do is take their dignity away in that process. And a lot of times we're willing to do that at the expense of winning an argument.
Amen.
And if you know that going in, or you realize you've done that, you can go back and fix that. I was in a meeting years ago, and somebody made an offhanded comment, and what I really learned the power of that lesson of asking for forgiveness was before I got back to my desk, this person had emailed everyone in the meeting and said, I was way out of line with that comment. I should have never said that to you. And that's exercising that humility
Amen.
with my daughter, right?
Yeah.
And then addressing the piece of it that mattered to everybody in the room.
Why are we so afraid of humility and being humble? So to me, it's like if I make a mistake and I'm aware of it, or I feel it even remotely, I want to reach out to that person and apologize. It's just like Roy said, I make mistakes every single day. Just being on this camera doesn't mean that I have it all together. He doesn't either. Neither does Melanie over here. None of us have it together all the time.
Melanie might.
Oh yeah, probably her. She's got it. She's got it all together. But I think that humility, people are afraid of it. You mentioned it earlier. People view it as a weakness.
Right.
And I don't understand that. So when you're in your groups, when you're
Right.
teaching this, how do you get people to accept that humility is not a weak
Right.
thing? It's a strength. It's a positive. It's a wonderful thing to embrace. That's my opinion, but I'll let the experts speak.
Expert only in failing a lot of times, right? I mean, that's, it's humility that allows us to see things much more clearly. It's humility because humility says I have the capability to take a step back and take me out of the equation, right? Recognize every human being is wired for certain behavior. We are only that which we've been taught.
That's that UCF education
Taught.
right there.
Taught and
I love
trained to
UCF.
do, right? And so if we're willing to take a step back and admit that I don't understand something, then we get to learn it. If we can admit that I don't always behave the right way, we can change that. If we're not willing to do that, and you know, one of my biggest influences is martial arts, and for the last 25 years, I've had amazing instructors and teachers that I learned from. And the biggest lesson that you learn the higher you go in this is that you have to admit that you don't know things and be willing to fail at it consistently till you don't fail. And that's how you master things. And it's the same way in life. And humility allows me to accept that idea, allows me to go in and know that I'm going to fail, then know that I'm going to mess up, know that I'm going to need help in doing that. And we don't accomplish anything great in life by ourselves. It's always through the relationships of other people that know things and do things better and different than we do.
Collaboration. All right, let me ask you about in the business world, because in your personal relationships, I feel like this would be a little easier. You're invested, you're on a personal level. But when you're talking about working with large companies or small companies, it doesn't matter, and you've got top down that said, all right, Roy, I'm bringing you in, I want to talk about this, I think it's important. How do you change that environment? How do you address that? I feel like it would be a little bit of a different challenge than in a personal side.
Well, you would, right? Because we think of business in terms of numbers and oftentimes forget that business is nothing more than a collection of people at work. And what inevitably happens when I get with a team of leaders, executives, different organizations, all of this resonates because just as we want our personal relationships to be meaningful and fulfilling and productive, we want our cultures to be meaningful, fulfilling, and productive. And it's the same ideas that work in concert. So we've taken and aligned these up for people to actually see that when I have a trustworthy person that I'm working with, I have a sense of peace about working with that person, right? So at an individual level, I'm fulfilled at that. You know what that eliminates in a workplace? Risk. Does risk have a cost? It has a hard cost to it, right? Same thing with when I work in an environment where people are my advocates because they trust me. It means that they're loyal. You know what loyalty does? It cuts down on turnover. If you hire people, you know that it is far more expensive to have to go out and recruit great people than it is to pay and retain great people. So you want a culture that has those same things. So really, a lot of folks will look at training like this and call it soft training, right? The relationships at soft training.
Why do they call it soft training?
Well, because because of the group hug.
Understood. Well, listen, I like the group hug, but we're O-Team peer advisement people, so we get it.
So, but the point here is that all of this goes back to something you can measure. All of it in business will go back to something that costs you money. And if you don't invest in people and you don't provide people with the training, they don't know how to act when they're pressed. So when you, as somebody who's invested a lot of time and energy in the crisis communications world, I study instances where companies make really bad choices. Individuals are forced, when you look at some of the tragic corporate stories, whether it's Enron or others, people made decisions based on not having the clarity, not having the moment to make the right decision.
Yes.
And feeling pressed to do something that maybe from an inside view they knew better, but because this pressure was coming in, how do you balance that out? I want leaders to understand that you have to emphasize to your employees how to make better decisions. If all you're doing is cramming financial decision making down somebody's throat and they're faced with an ethical decision, a clinical decision, other decisions that affect somebody's lives, which decision are they going to make if all you're doing is emphasizing, rewarding a certain side of it? So you've got to invest in people in these types of things. You need to remind people. You need to, if we believe in education, we believe in the idea that we have to be constantly learning and doing the right thing.
Where did the idea to develop this, and it's basically at this point, I would say, your life's work, trust, not that you're dying anytime soon, but you know what I mean. But you've done it. No, I do not know anything. Pretty much nothing.
Right.
But how did it come to you? Because I think people, they get the idea, like you might have had an idea, you might have had an inkling, either
Right.
peer advisement in
Right.
Lambda Chi, at
Yep.
student government, but then to take it to the next level and then implement it and then build a whole world around it is something that I think people would love to do, but they fear it. They don't want to take the leap. They don't know
Right.
how to do it. So how did that all transpire?
There's 3 points in the career path that I think this became my ministry, if you will. The first was 20 years ago, helping to open a small hospital up in Volusia County. I walked into a situation where we really had to take a step back and be intentional about building trust first. And there were just so many issues that the community was facing that we needed to be a part of. And I saw it pay off in many different ways. And then I got to spend 13 years with a group of guys at Consensus Communications doing work for some of the best organizations in the world, and a lot of them here in Central Florida. And a lot of our work was in crisis and issues management, so we had a front row seat to really watch companies that made really good decisions about things and some that didn't. Learning from that, I found that the consistency was in what people did and were willing to do to invest in relationships early. And then about 10 years ago, I made a trip out to California with a dear friend of mine, Wendy Kurtz.
I love her.
To see,
Hi, Wendy.
to see some authors talk about the importance of telling your story. And I really became motivated on the idea that the purpose needed to shift to really find a way to teach and train people that you improve your results when you improve your relationships with a much more intentional mindset and intentionality about trust. And so I've been working hard on that, putting that together, doing a lot of speeches and talks and over the years. And then Todd Chobatar and the folks at Florida Hospital Publishing sat down and said, we'd love to roll this out, and we really want to add a dimension to it. So one of the things that I was able to do in the last 2 years is partner with a co-author, Dr. Omira Mansfield, who runs our emergency department at Celebration Health, and bring not just the some of the key concepts that we were looking at from a business and maybe personal development side, but a whole litany of ways to improve your health. Because when your relationships are better, your health has a direct impact to that. There's a lot of correlation to the things that you can and can't do when you have healthier relationships. There's so much that we see in that. And it changes your outlook. And one of the things that I've been very fortunate to align to with Florida Hospital and Adventist Health is bringing this content out aligned to a set of health principles that talk about the ideas of outlook and interpersonal relationships and even faith and how that applies to trust at its highest level. And so we were able to roll out the training. It's active in our organization, and we have a group that can actually bring this program to organizations outside of the hospital. And I'll provide you with a website where people can actually go out and take a look at that. And if it's something they're interested in, they can contact our health performance strategy team.
So one last question, and then we'll give all Roy's contact information, and we'll head out. How is that impact? You talked about your daughter, you talked about faith and that example, that was awesome. Tell me how that's impacted you as a husband, as a father overall, because here you are talking about trust.
Right.
And did it change the way that you interacted with your children, how you interacted with Kim, your wife? How did that make an impact on you as you're going through this whole transformation?
And transformation is such an important word in this, and because it really captures the idea that when you invest time in people, you change. I mean, there's just no other way to look at it. The more time I spend with people and investing in what's best for them and with them, I get so much more out of it. And as I said earlier, it really became more of an obsessive ministry to me to be able to see people's lives impacted by it. And I get the opportunity oftentimes to run into folks years later after I've talked to their group or their their work, or in some cases, I'll get other people engaged to it, and they'll be able to manage through difficulties, and realize that, again, that when I take responsibility for something, I'm changing myself as much as anything else. And sometimes it's not the other person that I'm going to change, and then just the recognition that I need to be more present in my relationships, whether it is my family, my children, my wife, my friends, all of that, and make time for that in a day and age where it's so easy to get distracted and locked into things.
All right, so we're going to share all of Roy's contact information, how you can reach out to him, how you can learn more about the trust transformation, or more about Roy and what he does and his life's work. You probably don't like that word, but
or more
I love
about
that
Ted.
word.
Call me about Ted.
No, do not. Listen, I have just as much
Yes,
stuff
you do.
on Roy Reid, so we will not go down that path. Any parting words of wisdom, anything you want to share with them before we head out?
No, just, take time to be with other people, take time to invest in your relationships. All of that matters, and all of that comes back 100, 1,000-fold.
Agreed. All right. Love you, brother. Thank you
You
so
too,
much
man.
for being on.
Sure.
We love you guys. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Reach out to Roy. Isn't this awesome? Talk about trust. I love it because it really is transformative, not to really play on words, but it changes your life when you get kind of in touch with this. So reach out to him, reach out to his organization. Take a look. We love you guys.